This is the Convene podcast. Welcome to a special episode of the Convene Talk. Together with the Convene editors, we recorded on-site at Convening Leaders, and in this special episode, we share our impressions so far from the event. And this is day 2 for us. My name is Magdalena Tanasova, Digital Media Editor at Convene.
We kicked it off with the Clintons. So I think a moment that stands out in my mind and probably everyone else's is when the moderator, Holly Ransom, asked a very eloquent but long question to Bill, which was essentially, what do you foresee happening with politics, global politics in 2024? And his answer was simply a chuckle and I don't know, period. And he went on after that, but really what the takeaway was, he just doesn't know, which I kind of appreciate. So I thought that was funny. That was kind of a highlight for me this morning. Well, I don't know, what did y'all think of the session?
You know, I love that because I think he followed that up with, more people should say, I don't know. And we should, yeah, we should. I thought it was a great session. They talked a lot about how we can talk to one another and talked about just the divisiveness and how people get so angry with one another and how can we really listen to each other. And it made me think, I was excited, we're working on a cover story about listening, and I think that's popped up a lot during the meeting, people talking about the importance of listening.
Yeah, they gave the example of when Chelsea was, 9 years old, they used to play parts of Bill Clinton's, when he was governor, of their political rivals or whatever, and so they used to have Chelsea also play a role. And so he told this story about how she surprised them all with a very smart response of one of their rivals. But then Secretary Clinton said how it might be a good thing for maybe politicians to role play in that same sort of way, and that might bring more nicer discussions, I guess, instead of attacks all the time in politics.
I liked what he said a lot about, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he said, years ago, President George Bush and I, would obviously very different on the political scale, and we would get into it at times, but we always appreciated and respected each other. And I feel like I remember that. I was pretty young at the time, but that is around the time when I was able to start voting, and I remember that, and I miss that because I don't think that exists anymore, sadly. So that kind of made me a little bit, yeah.
I actually liked what Hillary said about women showing up and how much is required of us versus men just being men. And that resonated with most of the audience being women. And I just hope that men hear that they require a lot of us in terms of how we show up, and that we're still judged by looks. And like what she said, if we can do the job, let us do our job and show up as we are and not change to fit a certain image that somebody else has of us. And I love that. And right. As a foreigner, just seeing them both on stage, that was pretty cool. I'm sure that I don't have the same relation to them like you do, because Bill Clinton was your president, he was not mine. But again, seeing them and seeing how you as locals react to that, and thinking of my country and how our presidents and past presidents are viewed currently, I think it teaches me a lesson. I think the other countries a lesson that we should learn from all of you. Just the respect that you have and that you're, so willing to listen to them and what they have to say, no matter how active they're in the current climate, but still listening to them. I think that's very cool. I really like that. Special.
Well, and I appreciated that it seemed to me to be not an overly political talk, even though they are politicians. I liked what Hillary said. She said that she's an optimist who worries a lot. And I thought, okay, I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah, for sure. And Jen, you saw something yesterday about boycotts?
Yeah, the session kind of made me think back yesterday to the session I pretty much ended the day with. And the topic has been on my mind because it's for a story in the January-February issue, so look out for this if this piques your interest. But it's about boycotts and travel bans and reactions to that in terms, from the industry. And there was a great session that was led by Howard Givner, our Senior Vice President of Knowledge and Innovation. And it included Tommy Goodwin from Exhibitions and Conferences Alliance, Beth Sermont from 360 Live Media, and Robin Troutman from the National Association of Councils on Developmental Disabilities. And they all had such amazing insight into this issue, which is that, again, we're just seeing more and more laws either enacted or be put into motion. I think last year we actually set a record, sadly, for the number of discriminatory laws against LGBTQIA+, hope I got that right, the acronym, infringing on their rights. They were the most ever was enacted and the most ever bills were introduced in states. So obviously this is a very topical issue that's not going to go away. So I'm going to explore this a little bit in the story, but there were some wonderful takeaways. And I think one of the biggest takeaways that I think anyone, regardless of who you are in the industry and what your role is that you have to be thinking about this and be prepared. And I'm going to read a quote that I actually wrote down from Beth Sermont from 360 Live Media. And she's also the founder of a company called, or I guess not a company, a nonprofit called Social Offset, which if anyone listening is interested in that, we have a great story about that by our editor-in-chief, Michelle. But her quote was, if you're not sitting right now with a letter that is ready to go out that explains the decision that your organization is making in terms of whether or not to move your conference or cancel it, you are already behind. If you are a destination, if you aren't sitting with a toolkit that shows how your destination is inclusive and is offering safety and the security needed for people to come to your destination, then you're already behind. You needed these things not yesterday, but 6 months ago. You think it's not coming for you, you are wrong. So more on that to come. I'm still piecing it all together, but I mean, it's such a hot topic and an important topic, and I'm excited to kind of connect the dots between all these different sessions and conversations that I've been having. So.
Yeah, and it's not just the LGBTQ plus issue. It's a lot of other things, abortion rights. There's so many divisive issues now that could lead an organization to boycott or want to boycott, or certain members of the organization to want to boycott. And I thought it was interesting, didn't Howard say that the leaders of, like the people sort of leading the idea of ways to work around or other opportunities besides boycotting are more industry people than destination? Or did he say something like that?
Yeah, alternative. So like the social offset, kind of in that vein. So yeah, I think that was kind of, we saw that being initiated and started by like organizations like ours and also Destinations International. But what I'm seeing in my research is that increasingly event organizers and their groups are saying, no, you know what, we want to be politically engaged. We know now that it's important to our members more than ever. And we have some research actually on that we're going to be including from Howard, that we're going to be including in the piece. And we also know that canceling, boycotting, it's actually not effective. We actually have some history to look back at, and there aren't really any examples in terms of this industry, not to saying boycotts in general, that it hasn't given the desired effect. And actually what helps more is sticking with the destination and finding ways to connect with those affected communities locally and giving back to them, listening to them, and also listening to your constituents. So that's what I'm hearing more and more examples of. And there was a great example in the session from the National Association of Councils on Developmental Disabilities, who chose to stick with their location, which was Orlando, Florida, despite, some of the things that we're all familiar with that's happening in Florida. I think we're seeing a lot of changes in how our industry, in terms of event organizers, are reacting. So it's interesting.
So organizers can build into their programs ways to address it, or
exactly.
I don't know if I want to say fight it, but to support the communities that might be under attack or whatever.
Exactly.
In those destinations.
Yeah. And if they leave altogether, the people in those destinations that are affected are really, doubly disenfranchised.
Exactly.
You've got the laws that are affecting them, then also then they're not connecting, being further isolated.
Right.
Exactly. I think this one particular group, because there are books that were banned in, I can't believe I'm saying this, books that were banned in Florida, and they asked some attendees, bring these books for donation to community libraries so we can bring them back. I think I have some in my notes here, some of the other things that they've done, but they're definitely across several groups that I've been looking at. They're donating to local nonprofits, within those areas. They're also actively working with DMOs on these issues, and DMOs are definitely working to get that message out, like we are open to helping. So it's definitely not a one-sided thing.
And in terms of issues, Barbara, I know you went to something connected to sustainability.
I did. I went to a sustainability session, and it featured Lauren Parr from AGU and a colleague of hers, and Amanda Simons from the Honeycomb, and then Dr. Frank O, I think, excuse me if I'm wrong about that, but from Singapore. And the session I was really excited by the session because I just feel like it was such a leap forward for the conversation. Because there's been sustainability sessions at Convening Leaders for, 2 decades probably. And I feel like we're stepping into an era of transparency and accountability and just talking about things that we don't have the solutions to. Not presenting solutions, but saying, and specifically what I've heard called the elephant in the ballroom is that air travel is the largest contributor to carbon. And so it was really great discussion there about Lauren Parr talked about the fact that, just talked about maximizing what you get out of travel. Like AGU has climate science, brings climate scientists together. And, the contention is that it's worth it because people can exchange ideas. But you have to be aware of what the cost is and make sure that you make the most of it as you continue to look for solutions and work for ways and control everything that you can control. But she said something that just struck me. She said, to tell someone not to travel, you're coming from a place of great privilege. Because if you are, if you've already traveled, you already have your network, it is not so important to you as if you're a scientist starting out that wants to meet other people in the world that are working on the same problems you're working on, and just to exchange ideas. So I thought that was really striking. And there's just a lot of energy in the room. The session was scheduled for an hour and 15 minutes, which I thought seemed a little longer. And I thought, is that going to feel long? And we went, we were still talking 20 minutes after the session ended because there was just so much engagement and people were sharing their strategies, and I just think that's something I'm really excited about. The way that our new head of global sustainability is kind of not staying at the 101. We're like talking about scopes. We're talking about transparency, looking at data sets. And so I think that's really exciting.
I love that. Yeah, we're past that point of just speaking about sustainability, but being a bit more strategic. I mean, we're so late on so many aspects.
Right.
And
yeah,
I don't know if I've ever heard that at a event like that in our industry, speaking about the fact how much we contribute to with CO2 emissions, with building stuff, like building hotels, building venues. That's a lot of them are like, which relates to your story, right? From
I was just going to have a point of clarification.
Yeah.
Aviation's only 2.5% of what contributes to carbon emissions.
But in our industry, it's one of the larger.
Right, but I'm just saying in general, like, if you look at where carbon emissions are coming from, aviation only is 2%.
right. Construction is a
Exactly.
far
It's
greater.
corporate. I think
Yeah.
I don't think it's as, when you look at it from that perspective, like where it's really coming from is, if you look, like, it's corporations, it's building, it's that.
And maybe I've been drinking the Kool-Aid, but I think convention center, I'm amazed at convention centers, at the commitment they have to being sustainable in the way, and it's really part of it's in their DNA.
Yeah. I mean, just building the building itself. I'm sure that if now there is a construction of a convention center, they'll be a bit more mindful not to use concrete that much and to be using more natural materials like they did in Paris, constructing that single venue for the Olympic Games that you wrote about.
Yeah. And here's what I would love to see. I would love to see research that really quantifies what contribution face-to-face meetings make to the production of knowledge. Like, I know that right now I was reading on the plane about new ways of making concrete, and it's like, are the collaborations that create those breakthroughs, how much of that is done through meetings? And it might be that after we turn off the mics, I say, oh, this has already been done here. But if anybody knows about that research, I'd love to know. Because, when I was thinking about taking a job in this industry, I really, like many people, didn't know of it as an industry. But I just thought of the way that journalism conferences, that just all of the education and the relationships that I made through going to meetings, it made me go, oh yeah, it's a way to create knowledge and help people along.
I mean, I think we know from, like, if you look in history back at, like, World Expos, World Fairs, which, like, I mean, they still exist. They're still going on. I went to the one in Milan back in I can't even remember. I think it was like 2014 or something. But, like, I mean, the biggest inventions and breakthroughs and, like, that's where they would be. And that's where they would either be revealed, or people will, the greatest minds of their time would all come together in one place. Like, I think, like you said, like, it would be so interesting to look at that. And also it would be really interesting to do sort of a timeline of all the major events and innovations of history, and that were made or had something to do with a meeting or event. Because I can guarantee most of them probably, had something to do with that.
I think that, porcelain is introduced from China, I think, at an exposition in Paris.
Oh, really?
There was, the Crystal Palace.
Oh, yes, yeah. So,
scientific meetings and medical meetings, I imagine that still happens, right? I mean, it may not be an earth-shattering discovery, but it's maybe a step.
Yeah, and
to a bigger thing.
And there's a lot of, there's arguments about how much of that can be done online now. And so, I think just to look and see how much can happen online and what happens in person.
But it depends, right? Because again, with medical conferences, do you want a doctor who just simulated a surgery to operate on you? Or do you want one that was at an event where there were cadavers and, he looked at the hands of a professional with more years of experience that showed him the exact technique?
Yes.
I prefer the second one. If I know there's only one with the online knowledge, I'll be like, thank you, I'll pass.
You know what I also think is that, there's something that happens in quantity of time. Like, if you're online, you're kind of interacting with somebody really quickly. If you don't have something to say online, you disappear. But you can, sit next to somebody at dinner or over coffee, and you might spend 15 minutes with them, and over that time, something emerges, a point of connection, an idea. And I feel like online, if it doesn't happen quickly, you shut it down. There should be, at some university, the Center for the Study of Transfer of Knowledge at Conferences.
Yeah.
There's got to be someone who's studying this. I feel like there's a meeting for that. There's a person for that. There's a person who's studying it.
There is a guy in Toronto who's studying the transfer of knowledge at trade shows.
Oh.
There you go.
Love it. I love how you know that.
Well, I even find it interesting here. There's all these tables set up in just random spots,
Yeah.
And people, they're always full. There's always somebody, 2 people or 4 people talking in these spaces, and I just feel like they're really taking advantage of it. And it's probably informal. It's probably just, let's all sit down, but you wonder what kind of conversation, what's coming out of the conversation, and what it leads to, I guess.
Yeah. We kind of spoke about the humans and the technology, and I was at a session called the Human Heroes versus AI Wizards, which was very interesting. It was a game that was played with a real case, with a real association that they have an event that's taking place in this September in Miami. And they gave the case, okay, can you help us create a marketing campaign that's innovative and targets more international participants that are younger? So they gave us a little, some details. I sat on the human side because that was the understaffed side. There were 4 AI teams and just 1 human. Ooh. And it was very interesting to see the reactions of people and how the teams work together. Of course, because I saw only the human team, and they were very, okay, this is the case, let's work on it. And it was very natural what people came up with. There were some very innovative ideas that came out of this conversation. There were nice nuggets that I took, this is very hard to do without a computer, because as the human team, there was no technology involved. Or, how, I wish I could Google that, things like that. Or I wish I could ask AI to help now expand on this idea. But of course, we're not allowed. And then the AI teams came with a lot of granular details, but little innovation. So it was interesting to compare. And then there was a panel of judges, and the panel actually selected the human team.
And they didn't know which was which. They just saw the...
No, they did, because every team presented their ideas.
Oh, okay.
So
but it was
they did
one human team and 4 AI, and the humans won?
Yeah.
Wow.
And Nick Borelli at the end, he was on the judging panel, and he's the person who has the AI course with ELI. So he said, the real winners are all of us having all these tools at our disposal, and the fact is that humans can now free their time and not do all the granular details by hand. They can just leave it to AI, and have more space and time for just brainstorming and do what naturally comes to us.
Being creative. Yeah.
Just thinking together with others. And I love that. It's a very cool session.
Thinking together with others.
Yeah.
There's a nice ring to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, think bigger, bolder, and better, right?
Right.
Yes.
Anything that you're looking forward to rest of the day?
Yes. I am going to, and I don't have the title in front of me, but it is about adult neuro. It's adult learning, and it's just about how adult learning styles, and I'll learn the topic. I'm really looking forward to that.
Sounds good.
Yes.
And Boys to Men.
Boys to Men tonight. Yep. I'm looking forward to tomorrow's main stage.
Oh, yeah.
Not just because it's my MBL. I think it'll be interesting to hear her talk about mental health, and that's an issue that is important in this industry as stress rises, even though the pandemic's over, and there's still a lot of stress issues. Meeting planners take care of everybody else but themselves, sort of, and I hope it's sort of strategy about, or part of it is strategy about, taking that step back for yourself too.
Well said. Awesome. Well, thank you all. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and until next time.